Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this morning for this sold out event, which is very exciting. Um, it's great to see so many people here and to know that there's so much interest in the funding schemes generally and the new schemes specifically. So we've got a really excellent session this morning. So we've got three speakers. So Rob Calder will be kicking things off, and Rob is the CEO of SSA, and we'll be talking about the kind of the new funding scheme generally. Then Hollie Walker was a successful PhD applicant in the last year or two, Hollie, and you're going to be talking about your experience of applying and giving tips for applicants. And then Inge Kersbergen is a an ex-SSA fellow, an SSA trustee, and is also a shortlister for the PhD studentships, and she's done that for a number of years. So she'll be giving you kind of some tips from that perspective as well. After each talk, we'll be taking a couple of questions. So if you do have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat is probably easiest. I would say it's probably worth just trying to avoid questions that are too specific to your PhD or topic because we can't really get into individual cases. But if you've got general questions, that would be obviously great if you could post those in there. And then at the end, we'll have kind of 10 to 15 minutes for a bit more of a panel Q&A as well. So if there's questions that pop up later, then do feel free to continue popping those in the chat. Okay, so first up is Dr. Rob Calder, who is the SSA's chief executive. He has over 20 years experience in the sector across addiction treatment and research settings. His career has involved high impact policy research, service management, research into the workforce, implementation studies, science communication and capacity building. He's been very busy. And Rob is going to speak to us about the new funding schemes. So I'll let you kick off, Rob, and just let me know when you want me to change the slides.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Melissa. Rob, and I'm going to be talking about the organisation, the funder element of preparing an application for a PhD. So I'm going to be talking specifically about addiction healthcare goals a little bit, about what that is, and the SSA's role, and how that can kind of shape what you apply for. And then also slightly more broadly about the kind of information you should look for in a funder and how that can inform how you apply for something. So next slide, please, Melissa. So just to kind of start off with the Addiction Healthcare Goals flagship research leadership program, which the SSA is administering, and that's on this particular funding round. So this is Addiction Healthcare Goals research, and I think it's always important when you're looking at a funder or an organisation to take a few steps back. And with Addiction Healthcare Goals, this originated in the addiction missions, which started off in the missions, which were established several years ago. And this was in response to some of the successes that came out of science and collaborations and investment during the COVID-19 pandemic. And it was kind of saying, well, actually, with the right kind of investment, with the right kind of capacity building, with investing in leaders and building those collaborations, and having research that has a direct line into treatment and making a difference to policy, treatment, practice, that actually you can make quite a substantial difference. And so if you look back at that as to where these have come from, it starts to make sense about how this funding is set up and what your role might be in it. So what this does, sorry, can you go back just one slide, please, Melissa? Yeah, so there's information on addiction healthcare goals on the left there. And a lot of the aims align with the SSA, and that'll be on our website as well. And so we're trying to do several things, really. One is to obviously fund excellent research. Another is to build research leadership. And so that involves people. We want to get the best people in, and we want to build their skills so that they can lead addiction science in the next generation. We're trying to develop a generation of addiction science leaders here. And through that, to develop an ecosystem in which addiction research is better, has a better impact, is more well connected, and is more joined together, so that the UK can become a leader in this, and more importantly, so that the research that we do can have a real impact on people who use drugs, on the communities that are affected by addiction, and so on. So when you're writing your application for funding under addiction healthcare goals and through the SSA, and this really aligns with what the SSA has been doing for several years. It's so amazing to have Hollie as a current PhD student, Melissa, who's organised this. Thank you so much for putting this together, Melissa. As an academic fellow, and Inge as a previous fellow and now an SSA trustee. It just shows the kind of pipeline approach that the SSA and the addiction healthcare goals are looking at in supporting people throughout their careers, so we can build people who will increase that capacity and the ability of addiction science to make a difference. So that's the kind of specifics, a brief thumbnail portrait of the specifics of addiction healthcare goals. Next slide, please. So when you're looking at any funder, these are the four things you should absolutely look at. And I'll go through these one at a time, but there's the funder identity, so who they are, the kind of things that they like, what you will get from your funder, and the details. Always look at the details. Your researchers, you do look at the details, but do look at the details. Next slide, please. So a funder identity, ask those big questions. Who is the funder and what are they trying to achieve? Now, I've covered some of this with the SSA and the addiction healthcare goals, that ecosystem, the people and the research leadership. That's what we're trying to achieve. So when you're writing your application, you demonstrate in your plain language summary in how it's all set out that oh my goodness, that's what I'm trying to achieve as well. Isn't this such a good fit? Now, different organizations will be trying to achieve different things. Most organizations will have some aims and objectives somewhere. You can look at those and make sure that you're answering those questions. You're telling the people who you're applying for funding how your research is going to help them achieve their aims. You're not just asking them for funding. You're saying, look, I can help you get there. This is where you want to get to. I can help you get there. So fund me. Then on one, please. Then look at the preferences. So this can be a bit ropey, and some of these preferences run through organizations as culture rather than anything specific in people's aims. So there are types of research that organizations kind of naturally gravitate to. There are types of research where they think, oh yes, this is very SSA, and there's some which isn't, and it doesn't really matter where your research fits as long as it's eligible. Look at the eligibility criteria, of course. But it changes how you frame it. So if you've got research that fits very, very closely with the kind of research that an organization has funded in the past, that's great, because you can say, look, this is a brilliant fit. I know that you're experienced in this. This is wonderful. This really, really fits with your organization. But similarly, if there are gaps, if your research sits outside of that, you can go into the organization and say, look, I know this is something new, but gosh, isn't that exciting? And I've been in those rooms where those conversations have been happening, where people have said, well, actually, we haven't done this before. And this really helps us fill a gap in what we do, in our knowledge, in our understanding, and in our outputs. So if your research is slightly outside of what an organization usually does, use that as a selling point. Say, look, I can really help you fill that gap. I can help you develop as an organization, broaden your horizons, all of those things. And if it fits very closely with what's been funded in the past, that's also your selling point. Look, this is a good fit for your organization. But be aware of what it is that you're selling and how. And then on to the funding. So obviously, find out what funding you get and what other support. So with the funding that's coming up, that's due to launch next week, the PhD funding, we offer UKRI tuition fees and stipend across 3 years. There are options for extensions. We want people to do it in 3 years, of course we do, but we understand that things are sometimes delayed. Ethics usually. So look for what the funding is, because that changes the length of time, the amount of funding, the stipend, the tuition fees, and what's covered. And we offer £5,000 research costs across the study. But also look at the other support that you get from organisations. So do you have access to alumni? One of the advantages of the SSA and addiction healthcare goals is that we are addiction specific. We're one of the few, the SSA is one of the few addiction specific academic funders around. And that means that our trustees, our staff, our alumni, our membership are all focused on addiction. Our journals are addiction specific journals. If you're doing an addiction PhD and you come to the SSA, we have those connections. We either know someone who has this expertise or we don't, and we want you to come into the organization to bring it. And that can be a real benefit. If an organizer is larger and crosses different subject areas, different like mental health or whatever, that can be a bonus as well. So it depends a bit on what you're looking at, but look at that other support. Are there alumni networks? How big is the organization? Smaller organizations, like we know what the delays have been on people's PhDs, and larger organizations may not have that level of personality, and that might be a good thing. But know what it is that you'll be getting from different organizations and different funders. And then finally, onto the details. Get the details right. Just please get the details right. There's timelines and deadlines. Like, don't allow your first contact with an organization to be on deadline day and you sending an email saying, I thought this was UTC, not BST. Can I still submit my application? It's just too nerve-wracking for everyone involved. So get the deadlines, know exactly what the deadlines are, know what the eligibility criteria, know what's required in the application form, and make sure you have all those things prepared and you submit it. Don't let yours be the excellent PhD application, but actually they were missing this letter, they were missing this confirmation, so they're going to have to try again another year. That does happen if your application isn't complete. And because the details are too important to trust to my memory, I've put some of them down on the next slide. So timelines, so this opens next week. The PhD scheme opens along with the fellowship one. The deadline is 15th of January, and I haven't put a time on there to make sure that you go to the website and see what time we put on there, and whether that's BST or GMT or UTC or 5 p.m. or end of day or close of business. Interview is going to be in late March. The eligibility for this round, I want to take a couple of minutes. A horrible feeling I'm slightly overrunning, but take a couple of minutes. So the eligibility for this round is addiction healthcare goals only. So that means it's alcohol, drugs. There needs to be a direct line between your research and treatment implications. We're not funding primary prevention in this. Now, the alcohol and drugs thing mean that in this round, we won't be funding tobacco only research, and we won't be funding behavioral addiction research such as gambling. The SSA usually does. And when we run a second round this year, which we're aiming to do in spring 2026, it will be the wider eligibility criteria, including all things related to addiction, because the SSA is fascinated with all things related to addiction. Addiction healthcare goals are also fascinated, but their funding remit is slightly narrower. So for the one that's opening next month in November, it's alcohol and drugs only, treatment related, not primary prevention. But the SSA broader criteria for the second round, which will happen spring next year, there'll be a wider eligibility criteria. And I realise that's probably confusing and I've probably not been very specific about it. So do get in touch if you want a bit more clarity on that. So that's everything. And yeah, I think there's a couple of minutes for some brief questions, and then there'll be longer at the end for all of us, I think.
Okay, just have a quick look in the chat. I just wondered, Rob, if you could just say very briefly what you mean by primary prevention. So what is, just for the avoidance of doubt, what do you mean when you say primary prevention?
Yeah, gosh. There are web pages that describe this, and I'll hunt it down because there is a specification for it. There is a kind of a definition in primary prevention in terms of research stages. But what we're looking at with addiction healthcare goals is about treatment. So it's about helping people who have developed addiction issues with addiction or substance use. It's not about preventing people having access to drugs or experimenting with drugs, or it's not kind of general population level interventions to reduce the amount of exposure people have to addictive substances. It's about how to treat addiction. So that needs to be the focus. There's a more specific definition, which again I'll post because there's primary prevention, secondary prevention, and various different stages. So I'll dig out that webpage and post a link to it. But it's very much the focus on helping respond to addiction rather than prevent. If that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks. And then a very quick question before we move on: is the funding only for UK students, or does it apply for international students as well?
So this is for UK students. So people need to be based in a UK university and based in the UK for the duration of their PhD.
Yeah, and I think it's the case that only UK, like home student fees are covered, aren't they?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
think if you were an international student, you could potentially apply if you were based at a UK institution, but that you would need to find some money for the difference. Is that right?
It is. But I think it's probably worth saying as well, and this is such a good question because it goes back into the purpose of this. This is the funding is about generating producing a generation of research leaders in the UK. And so what we want is for people to stay in the UK, to do their research, to generate that leadership, and to bring people along with them and develop areas of expertise within the UK. So if you were applying from outside of the UK, you'd need to demonstrate your commitment to staying in the UK, to contributing to that research ecosystem that we're trying to build. And I think that's quite an important thing that you'd need to outline.
Okay, brilliant. That's really helpful. Thanks, Rob. Just for the interest of time, we're going to move on now. So the next speaker is Hollie Walker. And so Hollie Walker is a current SSA-funded PhD student, and she's based at King's College London. Her research focuses on mixed methods and looks at post-treatment addiction recovery in the UK, particularly focusing on access to and the role of continued care. So she's going to speak to you about her own experience of successfully developing her application and also interviewing for the PhD studentship, and she'll provide tips based on her experiences. So Hollie, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, so as Melissa said, hello, I'm Hollie. I am second year King's. I was successful in the studentship application, I think in 2024. But I will probably talk you through more what it's like to go through the process and what the steps of the process actually are or were. I would still recommend that you check. Next slide, please, Melissa. Next button, I think. Yeah, so I would say that while I was building this, there are probably three key things to just bear in mind throughout the whole process. And Rob has already touched on it, but alignment is really important. So I wrote familiarise yourself with the SSA vision and mission because I applied prior to this new influx in the Office of Life Sciences. But genuinely go and read all of the material, some of the backstory on the funders and where the funding is coming from, and align things as you go through. So don't explicitly at the end say, I hit this one, I hit this one, I hit this one. Weave it in and out your application, your presentation, and the way that you speak about your project. Next one, please, Melissa. And again, I am repeating what Rob has said. I would say get the timelines in as quick as you can. So my schedule was a little bit different. I think the timings are different for this round. But my deadline was March. I started on my application around January. And I'll probably speak about it later, but really it can start a lot sooner than that. Next one, please, Melissa. Lastly, it is a team effort. It is your application. You are solely responsible for driving this application, but involve your supervisors, leverage your network. So there'll be certain people that are really good at certain things and don't feel like you have to take 100% of the ownership, 100% of the responsibility. Use them and involve them throughout. Don't surprise them at the end, basically. Next one, please, Melissa. Yeah, it isn't just luck. You do need to be strategic. You do need to take time. I've said begin applications around January, but I would say give yourself 2 to 3 months before. And this is what I'm on about it actually might be a lot before, because I would highly recommend that you attend the SSA conference the October or November before you plan on applying to any of their funding if you haven't been before. So like for fellowships, people are probably going every year anyway, but for us it might be that you need to proactively take yourself to that conference. It will help you network. There will be other PhD students there. It will also help you understand the vision and the mission of the SSA and what it is actually about, rather than just reading it. So yeah, you might need to start even before 3 months before. Sorry, thanks, Melissa. So the first stage is the application. I would say this splits into two areas. The first area being about your project. I've wrote March, ignore March. This is all going to be a test of whether you go online and find out timelines. In the project side, I had to do a project plan, a timeline, and costs. So the project plan is for an academic audience, but really one that don't know your topic area. So I would recommend that you use approachable language. 2,000 words for 3 years of work is not a lot. Use your timeline, so the Gantt chart, to fill in some of what you can't put in your 2,000 words is what I did. So make your timeline very detailed. Your timeline will prove that it is feasible, include space for mitigating circumstances. Things do go wrong. Your panel know things go wrong. The SSA know things go wrong. When I say go wrong, I mean take a lot more time than it should. So if you're right up to the wire, might be a bit of a problem. Costs are, is this funding sufficient? If you are concerned, you should already have been accepted into your host institution. So with King's, we've got a postgraduate research support team. I should have, but didn't, gone to them and been like, have I done this right? Is this how much things cost? And that is all part of leveraging the broader network as well. Next one, please, Melissa. The second part of the application is around you, your host institution, and your team. So your background, I would keep quite succinct. So outline publications, presentations, awards, and technical skills. If you have relevant work history, I think it's very useful. I put all of my work history. I had an extensive work history outside of academia. There are skills in there that are very useful. And especially if you're doing kind of people-facing work, then if you have interacted with people, that is very helpful. Secondly, your career aspirations. So Rob's already spoke about what they're aiming to do, but I saw this very much as they are investing in you and your future, not just here's some funding for a PhD. And I would recommend that you sit and think about it of what do I plan to do? What do I want to do? Where do I want to go after? And be able to articulate that. And one thing that I would say is I framed it in terms of what I hope to achieve rather than what job title I would like. So not around when I grow up, I want to be a lecturer. More around I actually want to change this specific area. I want to improve these outcomes for this group of people. And that's really what I want to do off the back of it. And I think that could have been helpful. And then finally, why your team? I think it's really important to know what each of your supervisors bring. So my team were not a pre-built team that exists at King's. I have one person that I've worked with for a very long time, who is well known in the addictions field. I have a second person who is well known in the addictions field and works in my topic area. I have a third person who is nothing to do with addictions, but he is a specialist in a certain type of methodology that I really need, and he's brilliant at it. And be able to explain how you built that. Next slide, please, Melissa. The interview, you can click again if dramatic. It is not like a job interview. It does not feel like a job interview. You can prepare for it like a job interview, but it is not intimidating. It is a conversation of people that are invested and interested in your project and you and what you plan to do for the next 3 years. Press again, Melissa. 3 senior addictions researchers, you will be asked to do a presentation which is 4 slides and lasts 10 minutes. Those 4 slides do include a title slide, so 3 slides, 10 minutes, and then around a 30-minute conversation on your project plan. Next slide, please, Melissa. For the presentation, accept the fact it can't all go in. 3 years work in 10 minutes on 3 slides is impossible. Things will need to be cut. Use visual representations to demonstrate order or time. So that second slide has way too much words on it, but I used it to demonstrate I'm doing this first, that then, that over there and that over there, and this is qualitative, that's a review, and this is quant. And then in terms of practice, again, leverage a network, your supervisors, pick someone that you would be a little bit intimidated to present in front of, ask them for 10 minutes of their time, and something that's helped me in all presentations is, yes, write a script, yes, learn the script, but I would say practice until you get things wrong. Get things really wrong and don't allow yourself to stop, because if you're at the point of being able to self-recover, you're probably going to be okay. And I did that with this because the timing was so short. I just tried to force myself to recover from mistakes, and it helps me on the day, help the anxiety as well. Next one, please, Melissa. You can push all the buttons on this one. That's it, I think. The Q&A to me felt like, do you know your project inside out? And can you critically evaluate your methods? And can you hold your own in an academic conversation? It was very much a conversation. Inge was actually one of my interviewers and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I would ask a current PhD student, postdoc, or a supervisor to drill you on your methods choices. And then probably ask questions about, why didn't you do it this way? Why would you choose this method for this thing when that could answer it? Like, ask them to drill down a little bit. Articulate how did you build your supervisory team, practice why you're a good fit. So verbalizing your application and telling a story. My main point would be to listen. You are with 3 people who are interested, and sometimes they have really good points that you genuinely haven't thought of. Slow down, listen, ask them to clarify. And I genuinely did have a point where I was like, I can't answer why I haven't thought of that. But it sounds good. I might take it away. Thank you. And then scurried off to do it. Yeah, and try and enjoy it. If the more you can make it into a conversation, the easier it becomes for everyone and the more enjoyable it is. Next slide, please. Yeah, last thoughts. Remember alignment, remember your timing, involve people. And lastly, I have gone through what you can control, but there is so much stuff that you can't control. There is many things outside of your remit that goes into the decisions of why someone and why not another person. And everyone faces rejection. Get up and try again, basically. It's not against you. There's too much other stuff going on for it to ever be to do with you. But yeah, thank you. I didn't use a question slide, so we're just going to have to say.
Thank you, Hollie. That was wonderful. It was so helpful and packed with fantastic advice for this scheme, but also wider schemes and life, I think. Very wise words. So if anyone's got any questions for Hollie, so there is a question that says, should we look for supervisors first? So yes is the short answer to that one. I think you should have a supervisory team. And yeah, it's very possible that your application won't be successful the first time. Hollie, I wondered if you could speak to us about any kind of the challenges that you faced, or what was the biggest challenge you faced when putting your application together, and how did you overcome it?
So I would say something that I've learned and realised part of being in the PhD is that I built my project myself. I had an area that I really wanted to look at and was like, if I'm doing a PhD, it's going to be in this area. Self-building a project comes with a lot more doubt. It means probably a decent amount of more work to rule out why you didn't use other methods, why didn't you do this? You do have to go and pick your PhD team and build it. I would say one of the big ones was probably self-doubt, fueled by me being stubborn and wanting to build something myself. How do you overcome that? It's a lifelong pursuit. But really speaking to other PhD students is hugely helpful. Like, you are never on your own and everyone's been through it. And it's a very unique thing to go through that a lot of the population are not going through. So find other PhD students. And they're very nice.
Excellent. Thanks, Hollie. There's a question about feedback. The question is, SSA does not give feedback when the application is unsuccessful. How does one learn from application rejections? Rob, is that still the case for the PhD studentship?
No, we've changed that this year, so we do provide feedback on successful and unsuccessful applications. So at the end of there's a bit of process, and I'm sure Inge is going to go into this. But at the end of that process, the chair of the panel is going to collect feedback that's been marked for the applicant. So if it goes out for expert review, for example, they'll do some like internal stuff for the review panel, and then a few words for the applicant if that's appropriate, and that will be gathered and sent back to all applications, whether they've been successful or not, because everyone's project plan can benefit from that level of feedback. So yeah, we give that. We think it's really, really important because people do these submissions time and time again, and we need to be part of making them, helping people make them better and improve them each time.
Yeah, I think that's a really positive advancement, and I think it goes to show that the SSA are listening to the feedback that they get and are kind of trying to make it easier for people and trying to help people. So yeah, I think it's brilliant. And just to say as well that you do learn from every application you do, even if you don't get feedback. Like Hollie, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Oh yeah, definitely. I won't talk about other funders here, but I would recommend that there are other funding rounds going on outside of the SSA that if you're applying to and really want the SSA, I would recommend apply to another one that you might not be as much of a fit for, because going through the process is helpful. I genuinely think that sometimes you have to fail at one to get the other, because everybody has to learn certain things as they go through. And then just for everyone asking about supervisors, yes, you do need to be have been applied and accepted to your host institution, which is a whole other process in itself, but you should have been accepted by your host institution, and as part of that you will already have your supervisory team set up.
Excellent. Thanks, Hollie. I can see there's some more questions, but I can see that people are kind of responding more directly to the specific ones. So just in terms of time, we'll move on for now, but thank you very much, Hollie. That was really helpful. So next up is Inge Kersbergen. So Inge is a senior lecturer at the University of Bath. She is an absolute powerhouse in addiction research. She's got a background in behavioural science. She's done a lot of work looking at how different factors such as labelling or portion size or serving size impact on how much somebody eats or drinks. So we're lucky to have her here today because she's got lots of experience in shortlisting, and she's going to give you some tips based on that. So I'll hand over now to Inge.
So I am Dr. Inge Kersbergen. I have chaired the SSA PhD panel for a couple of years, and I've also been a panel member sort of more generally on the panel. And what I want to sort of share today is what I think the panel is looking for. Next slide, please, Melissa. So from our perspective, how the SSA scheme works is that all applications are assessed by one panel, all against the same criteria. So we have read all the applications and we assess them against the same criteria for every application. We might seek independent expert advice outside of the panel, for example, if it's a topic area none of us know anything about, or we need to have advice about a specific methodological problem, then we might get advice, but ultimately we're the ones assessing your application, and we are also the ones to interview the shortlisted candidates. So the panel members, as Hollie said, are three addiction experts who are not necessarily an expert in your area and very likely are not an expert in your area. We are independent, so none of us are related to any of the projects that are submitted. We are not at a university of one of the projects that are submitted. We have a range of sort of interests and backgrounds, and all of us are associated with the SSA in some shape or form, and we're probably several trustees or fellows, ex-fellows. So people who know the SSA inside and out are on the panel. Next slide, please. And we score the applications in three broad criteria. So are you the right or best candidate? Is your project the best suited for the SSA? And is your training and supervision appropriate and a good fit for this PhD? Next slide, please. So the questions we try to ask ourselves when we come to scoring the candidate is whether your previous research experience or formal training makes you suitable for doing an addictions PhD. You don't have to have done a master in addictions, but if you've done a master's in sort of an unexpected area, then you need to put more effort into trying to explain why this makes sense for you to do an addictions PhD now. We look at whether there's any outputs from previous research experience. So this might be papers, but also a conference presentation, a poster, a blog you've written, anything that sort of shows us that you are able to communicate your research to an external audience. We want to find out whether you are committed to a research career in addiction. So we don't want to just hand you 3 years worth of funding and then you go and do something completely different. We'd like you to stay in the addictions field, so it helps to show us why you want to do that and how you're going to do that, and whether or not you have a potential as a career researcher. So this is based on your CV, but also on how you've written your application. So have you been able to prioritize the most important information within the 2,000 words? All sort of come into this picture that we're trying to build on whether or not you're a good candidate for this funding. Next slide, please, Melissa. So I've tried to sort of explain what I think strong applications have done that weaker applications haven't. And on this candidate section, stronger applications have explained their involvement in research activities and outputs rather than just listed them. So if you've been a research assistant, as academics, we know that that role can look very different for different projects. So if you can explain to us what you've done, how you've done it, and how that has led to where you are now, that is a stronger application than if you just list the achievements. And we also really appreciate it when people can articulate why the career plans that follow on from their PhD and how the PhD is going to help you get there. Next slide, please. Then the bulk of the application is the project, and there are several questions we're trying to answer for ourselves on this project to rate, to score it. So is it suitable for PhD in scope? Is it too long? Is it too short? Are you going to be able to do it within 3 years? Sort of what are the biggest hurdles? Is it relevant to the SSA aims and for the addiction healthcare goals stream? Obviously, is it relevant to that particular scheme as well? Do you have a good understanding of the existing evidence? Can you articulate sort of the gaps in the research that you're trying to fill? Are you able to identify what sort of the key issues are, what people are still arguing about? All of those things need to be in the project, and we try to assess how well you've done that. Are the research methods and design appropriate? And I would like to point out here that if they're not, then you're not gonna be eligible for the funding, because that's such a key. Even if you're the best candidate, if you're proposing a project that just doesn't answer your research question, then that's not gonna lead to a successful application. And what's the likely impact of the research on the addictions field? And for the addiction healthcare goals, that is probably going to be quite a more sort of immediate impact. That's what we're looking for. But if you're looking at the SSA scheme more widely, this likely impact doesn't have to be, and after my PhD, there is a treatment. It can be, this will advance the scientific thinking around this in this way, which will help develop treatment in X, Y, Z ways. So it doesn't have to be your PhD is finished and addiction is solved tomorrow, but you have to articulate how you're going to contribute to that. So can you go to the next slide, please? So strong applications accurately summarize the background literature and the key issues in the field that the PhD will address. And a lot of applications fall down on this because they don't explain clearly what the background field is, and therefore they've not articulated why their PhD is important. It also should explain why their proposed methods are the best suited to answer the research question. They should be realistic within the time frame, and we are very experienced. We know how much is too much, and we also know when we think it's too little to fill 3 years. And it's really important to have a clear patient to public involvement component. And this should, a stronger application, it goes beyond saying, I will talk to PPI group and have them input on my questions. Like ideally this would be a lot more involved than that. Next slide, please. And then the final section that we score on is training and supervision. So we're trying to find out whether you're proposing a training program that is suitable to the proposed project and your skills. We're trying to figure out whether the proposed supervisors are experienced and appropriate for the proposed project, and whether the host institute is suitable and what support they provide. And the letter of support from your supervisor that we ask for in the application also helps us understand some of this. Next slide, please. So stronger applications include a training plan. It's really important that you understand that we are expecting you to need training. So being able to identify what training you need is a strength and not a weakness of your application. If you think that you don't need training, then you've not proposed a project that is going to develop your skills. So identifying the training you need is really important. And I see a lot of projects do not include this sufficiently, and then that means that they don't get any points for this section, and that therefore likely they might not meet the cut for the shortlisting. Try to have a supervisory team with a mix of skills and backgrounds needed, especially if sort of like Hollie, you need to sort of combine different areas of expertise, and that will make your application stronger, because a single supervisor can't provide all the support you might need. And give us a clear explanation of the institutional support. So does your host institute have PhD training programs? Does it have set courses that you can attend? All of those things will help show us that you understand what's available and what institutional support you will use. Next slide, please. And then my final overarching advice for the whole application is use lay-friendly language and avoid jargon. Because we are not necessarily an expert in your topic area, and we just are experts in addiction, and more generally, this will help us understand why your research is important and why this is the right way to do your research. So try to avoid a million acronyms and like make it easy to read. Make sure you answer each question fully and address all the points in the question guidance. So each question, we have guidance of what we expect you to include. And if you don't include that, that means that you're missing information that we're expecting you to tell us. And if you need any reasonable adjustments to be able to sort of successfully apply for this at any stage of the application process, this probably applies the most to the interview, but if there are any we can give you now, make sure to request these from the SSA in good time.
Thank you very much, Inge. That was really, really helpful. So we've already had a question in the chat, which is, are the project person and supervisory team, or I guess the training plan, equally weighted, or is there a heavier weight on one of them?
They're not weighted as such, so we don't have a general. I would say that the project is probably slightly heavier weighted. If you count the number of questions we're trying to answer, then you can sort of see the level of importance we place. So I would say the project is most important, but I don't think I can't think of any examples of where an applicant has scored low in any of the sections, but still been shortlisted for interview. So I think ultimately you need to just score high in all three of those areas. So that's unsatisfying, I know.
Thanks, Inge. Is the age of the applicant relevant for the success of the project?
No.
That's an easy one. I wanted to check whether the SSA allows resubmissions of projects that were previously interviewed but not funded, and if so, whether you recommend making substantial changes to the proposal or focus only on strengthening specific areas of feedback.
Yes, we do allow that, and we see resubmissions frequently. The panel is not always the same between years, but if a panelist has seen a previous project in an interview and then see the exact same project the next year, then you're not likely to going to be invited for interview again, because we want you to change the project based on the reasons that we've given you for rejecting it. So I would expect substantial changes, and that would depend on the feedback we've given you. I know that at least this year and so last year and the year before, we've given unsuccessful interview applicants feedback on their interview and application. So they should adapt their application for their resubmission.
Thanks, Inge. And then, would a multidisciplinary approach allow me to include supervisors from different universities? For example, if my host institution is one university, would I be allowed to have a secondary supervisor from a different university?
Yes, people have done that. I know that people have applied with supervisors from different universities, but be clear what support you're getting from who, and also keep in mind that the contract won't be with that other institution. So if you're getting all your support from outside the host institution that you're applying from, that's not going to help the SSA feel confident that they can sort of tell your host institution if, for example, they're not giving you the right support or not giving you enough support. So make sure that the bulk of your support comes from your host institution.
Okay.
Rob, do you want to correct me if I'm wrong?
No, absolutely. That's absolutely right. And I think it's really important to make sure that there's that clarity of expectation across your team on who's doing what and who's accountable for things, because over 3 years that can get muddy. But particularly with addiction healthcare goals, there is a move towards greater collaboration, and whether that's across universities or with groups of people with lived experience, or with tech companies, or whatever. If you can demonstrate, I guess there's that difference between a PhD that takes place in a single university and that finds something out, and one that generates connections and collaborations across sectors, within policy, within practice, across the UK, with different areas, that can improve how a PhD looks to a panel. It's like, this looks ambitious. It's something that's looking at the sector. It's about building a research ecosystem. So don't have them for the sake of them. But if your application involves those kinds of collaborations, that can be a good selling point.
Excellent, thank you. There's a couple of quick questions that hopefully we can rattle through, and then we can ask a little bit more. So are part-time PhD programs eligible for funding?
With all these things, you need to make a case. So if you're doing, say, 0.5 PhD, it will take 6 years. So you'll need at some point in your application to demonstrate that you understand it will take 6 years, and that that's okay on various timelines, and all those things, and that the work you're doing alongside it, or whatever else it is that you're doing alongside it, is going to work for that. 6 years is a long time on any study, and for a part-time application, we'd want to see that people had considered that and had a plan that was appropriate to the length of time that PhD was going to take. But absolutely, people need part-time PhDs for all sorts of reasons, and we're very supportive of that.
Excellent, thanks, Rob. There's a question about UK versus international, which we've already answered, but that's fine. Someone might have joined a little bit later, but in this instance, it's UK students, so only UK fees are covered, and the focus of the addiction healthcare goals is really to build capacity within the UK. One thing that you've all touched on one way or another is that it's very important to the SSA and to the alcohol addiction healthcare goals to build a future of research leaders. So I just wondered if each of you could fairly briefly reflect on how people can build that kind of evidence of ability to lead and leadership into their applications. Are there kind of specific examples that you could provide?
That's a really interesting question, and I think you'll have noticed that that's not one of the criteria we score on, but nevertheless, that is something that we can look at to see, for example, that potential for a career researcher. And as someone who's applying for a PhD project, we're not expecting you to have supervised 1 million master students or, led a project. But what we are looking for is that you show independence. So, for example, if it's your supervisor who's come up with the idea and you've just written it down, that's not going to show us your sort of ability to lead this project. So this project is probably your first opportunity to lead a large project yourself, but identifying how you've contributed to other projects, things where you've taken ownership and moved that forward, will be the best way to show that you can do this next step into your career, I think.
Rob or Hollie, anything to add to that excellent answer?
I think coming up with your own project really is probably one of the only ways that we realistically can. If you can't come up with your own project, or someone else has a brilliant idea, why would you come up with your own project? I would say really understand the landscape of that project. So like, get to know it as though it's your own, like care about it as though it's your own, care for what's going to happen after, and show scope outside of the PhD channel only. And that can be with PPI, be more involved in the PPI side, more involved in the follow on afterwards, have a plan for afterwards, like look outside of that 3-year channel as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Holly. And I think, yeah, just to add to that, it's rare that there's kind of a pre-packaged proposal that you can't have any input into. So even if the basis is there and the project plan is kind of broadly set, there's usually a lot of scope within that to think about methods, for example, or recruitment, or there's definitely things that you can really take on and like look into. And I think that really helps come through in the application and the interview as well. Rob, is there anything different to add on that, or?
Yes, I think there's just kind of two things. I mean, one is at the end of your PhD, you are a research leader in that area. You will become a research leader, and that's incredibly exciting. But also, academia is wonderful because leaders look very different across academia. You can be a leader in research methods, in a particular area of study, in idea generation, in bringing in successful grant funding applications, in publishing research. You can be a leader through ideas, or you can be a leader through presentations and collaborations and kind of that kind of thing. So the way that you become a leader should, like your PhD, should be very personalized, and actually think about what your skills are, what skills you can develop across your career, and how that might look for you. We don't just want to kind of find natural leaders who are kind of extroverts standing on top of a hill shouting at people to follow them. We want a wide range of different types of leadership, and this is academia. And one of the wonderful things about academia is that kind of leadership can take many, many different shapes. So kind of personalize it would be my thinking.
So one of the things that you spoke about, definitely Inge, but I think Holly as well, was around PPI and kind of inclusion of wider voices. And I think this is a really positive move in the addiction field more generally, and is really kind of being championed by SSA. But I wondered, for people who maybe haven't got much experience in that area, do you have suggestions of the kind of practical tips, I guess, for how people can thread PPI into their applications and plans?
We love it when people have already done some PPI to develop their PhD proposal, but it's definitely not the case that those are the only proposals that score highly. Ways to do that might be reaching out to existing organizations that have links. As Holly said, using your existing network is great, and particularly asking your supervisor about, or your proposed supervisor about, potential opportunities for you to speak with some members of the public specifically about your project to help develop it is a good idea. I would say for within the PhD proposal, it looks good to spend some of the funding that you're applying for on PPI. So using that to identify the right people, giving them reimbursement for their time and effort, and talking about how you're going to incorporate that in your sort of research methodology and your project proposal, I think definitely elevates projects for me.
Yeah, I basically agree. And I would say it's as important as if you've got a qualitative element and a quantitative element, and you're outlining those two, and you're planning on doing PPI, your PPI should also be in the same stature as the other two items. It also gives you a little bit of flexibility in that I had a whole area of mine, all of my measurement was going to be dictated based on the feedback from a certain set of PPI groups. So it's not a get out of jail clause, but you are being genuine if you say, actually, I'm not 100% yet on what scope that will take, because I'm planning to involve people in the selection of that. And something which I haven't mentioned as well is that if you have lived experience, it's okay to mention that you have lived experience, and if some of your networks come through lived experience, but also that having lived experience doesn't negate the need to do PPI, and do PPI to the same rigor that another researcher does as well. You're still going to be standing there in the capacity of a researcher, possibly just a little bit more relatable. I don't know, maybe not. But yeah, I would make it meaningful, because it is meaningful and it does change things.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Holly. Rob, have you got a very quick one on that? Because I'm just noticing we're at time, but if there's something burning.
I mean, I can't add to what Holly's just said, but I'm going to because it's just in my nature to. It was just to say, don't make it a bolt on. If you've got a lovely project and you think, oh my goodness, I need PPI on this, and you bolt it on, it will look like you've bolted it on. There's almost no project in addiction that can't meaningfully have PPIE in, but as with everything else, it needs to be in line with your aims, your objectives, what you're trying to achieve, and make it driven by those things. If you bolt it on, it will look like you've bolted something on.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, well, thank you so much to Rob, to Holly, and to Inge for presenting today and sharing your wisdom. It's been super helpful. If there are some questions that we haven't got to, I'm very sorry. That's my fault. I'm very bad at multitasking, as you'll have seen when I try and unmute. But there is a form on the website. So I think it's on the Alcohol Healthcare Goals homepage. There'll be a question form. So if there's anything that we haven't answered, please do submit your questions through there and somebody will get back to you. And this is being recorded and the plan is to share it. Exactly when that will be, I can't say just at the moment, but when we do share the recording, then we'll send that round to the kind of mailing list. If that's something that you're concerned about, then do feel free to get in touch with us as well, and we can kind of make sure that that gets to you. But yeah, thank you very much. Thanks all for attending. It's lovely to see so many of you, and can't wait to see the applications and all the exciting stuff that's coming through. So thank you very much to everybody.